The Ark ship brought hope and human marines. A ship built as a generation vessel to protect an alien civilization from a cosmic catastrophe arrives at its destination, bearing human military passengers trained during the trip. Commander. Elena Vasquez rested her hand against the thick glassed-in observation deck and appeared. Through the reinforced viewing port, as the blue-white star grew in size as it ascended through the transparent aluminum, 47 were left empty, vast dark of space. Color-flecked necklace of planets and stars, that is the Kepler 442, the Sanctuarian, enormous generation ship, quivered slightly as her fusion drives began to move, to orient itself toward the second world of an alien sun that the Zephyrians had staked their settlement on thousands of years before. Mankind had developed FTL. Alina turned her eyes away from the viewing port to the alien structures outside. The Zephyrian Ark ship architects had designed it for planetfall with a vessel of liquid curves and living materials that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent veins. But even so, after 48 years on this ghost of a ship, she never failed to be awed by the ethereal grace of their host's engineering. The walls seemed to heave with breath and colored themselves for a touch or mood. Gentle changes that had taken the human contingent years to decipher. "Commander, they're moving in the cargo bay," said Sergeant Marcus Chen in her neural implant. There was no tone in his voice, save for an intensity that all of them had grown accustomed to these past few days. "It seems that Zephyria is beginning to awaken." Alina nodded, although Marcus couldn't see her. Most of the Zephyrian crew members had been sleeping in their hibernation cubicles, which they could use to slumber in for decades at a time, while the ship steered itself. The majority of the crewmen were asleep, and only skeleton crewmen were at work, on shifts, to monitor human passengers' activities and the operation of the ship. But here, nearing their journeys more, all the creatures long stilled in this strange place were awakening. "Acknowledged, Sergeant. Initiate the initial phase of our controlled normalization protocol. I want all my units ready to go, but not aggro. Now we just have to see if 47 years of preparation is good enough." The deck plating echoed with the sound of her magnetic boots, stepping in a practiced rhythm as Alina made her way through the ship. The gravity had been adjusted to suit Zephyrian physiology, so everything seemed a little off-kilter for humans, but they had adjusted. They always adapted. She walked through sections of the ship now filled with the 15,000 human troops, who had volunteered for this historic journey. It was men and women of Marine II Star Force bent. From every single service and branch of Earth's unified defense forces, all handpicked, not just for their fighting abilities, but their mental fortitude, cultural adaptability. They had trained. They had studied during that entire ride, preparing themselves for a situation no military academy could ever fully prepare them for. Alina came in last, and the higher staff members were sitting in the conference room. Colonel James Morrison was a little older, a little more jaded, his lined face revealing years of war in 3 worlds before this mission. Beside him, Major Sarah Kim was browsing her tablet, perusing the latest intel data compiled by their embedded mimeologists of Zephyrian culture. "Status report, Colonel," Elena directed from the command chair behind the tactical plot. "The hibernation of Zephyrians is approximately 60% concluded as of 0800 ship time, Commander. We appear to be back on track. Our recovery process is proceeding as planned," reports Dr. Elias Thorne's Xenobiology Squad. "Yet we have detected some disturbing calm traffic from their ruling council." Alina frowned. Thorne had been their ambassador to the Zephyrian Scientific Council all along the journey. one of very few humans ever to have established an approximation of friendship with their alien hosts. If he was scared, they all needed to be scared. What kind of communications? Major Kim advanced, looking serious. Captain, listening in to their internal channels as we agreed. There is something big at stake, being circled around or decircled in whatever this they're calling the human question. To some, they are sympathetic to our cause and the original agreement of letting us build our own colony at the northern continent of the planet. Others are telling us our military is posing too great a threat to the survival of their species. Alina felt a cold not forming in her belly. It was bound to come. They were expecting it. It was a desperate, hasty deal between two frightened peoples, one trying to survive, the other faced with extinction. The Zephyrians had borrowed human tech to complete their arc ship before their dying sun consumed them. They'd been working how to save their species from the Cygnus X1 gravity anomaly, which was about to tear apart the whole solar system. But such desperate deals tended to fall apart. When the states saw they provided no assistance when struck. What's our current tactical assessment? Alina asked. Colonel Morrison turned the holoscreen upward and highlighted the inside of the Star Viper. Red for people, blue for Zephyrian civilization. We hold tactical control of the engine bays, the main armory and the navigation. But the Zephyrians run life support, the hibernation chambers and the planet landing program, head to head. Both species would take horrific losses. Alina pored over the screen, her mind sifting through scenarios she had wargamed for years. And what do we have on their military capabilities? Limited but disturbing, Major Kim added. The Zephyrians claim to be a pacifist race, but their records are littered with tales of interstellar wars throughout their early history. They've got some kind of weapons we can't even wrap our heads around. They used some kind of a neural disruptor field back there that could have dropped us all like fish without doing a thing to their own people. Now only the deep pitch of the ship's systems. Formant remained in the chamber. 15,000 human beings pressed heavily on the shoulders of Alina. They were so close now, so very close to their new home, so very close to realizing all of humanity's hope of being a genuinely interstellar species. But also they were criminals on an alien ship, at the mercy of creatures whose motives they understood little. Commander, a new voice came over the comm. Thorne's distinctive chrome accent caused the backs of those present in the room to straighten right up. Rush down to Lab 7 immediately. We have a situation. Alina found the gaze of her officers. On our way, Dr. It was in the middle of the ship, and Zephyrian and human technicians had worked together there all throughout the journey. The group is close enough now to overhear voices raised and, as Alina and her crew approach, the orchestral sounds of Zephyrian's spoken language stretched over the grinding human. English that obviously comprised an argument. Dr. Thorne came to the doorfather with his unruffled exterior of face, looking ghastly with something of concealed disquiet. His normally bright eyes were terrified, more frightened than Alina had ever seen. Commander, a big problem we have. The Zephyrians have been completing a surface scan of the planet, and they found something that changes everything. He led them through to the main lab, where massive screens showed detailed schematics of their destination world. The world was beautiful. It was big oceans, green continents, with swirly white clouds that showed an active atmosphere. But when the geographic data was laid over, there were red warning markers that caused Elena's blood to turn to ice. Doctor, what's happening? Dr. Thorne operated the display, as if zooming in on one of the planet's continents. Ruins, Commander. Perverted buildings, vast and purposefully and cunningly shaped, and men but just gone. This planet isn't as dead as the early surveys suggested. They have a native civilization down there, and from your thermal signatures that we're detecting, they're not extinct. Alina glanced down at what happened in front of her and felt the ground shift. The whole plan had been based on the premise that they would find a world where they could live empty-minded, just exist, a world for two refugee species to inhabit together, no muss, no fuss. The discovery of a native life changed every reckoning, every scheme they had formed. How recent is recent? Are we sure about it, Colonel? Colonel Morrison asked, his military mind already projecting the consequences. The atmosphere analyzers show you've been operating industrially for the last 50 years. Dr. Thorne responded, Commander, if we do make the planned landing, we're not in the business of being refugees in search of a place to be. We're invaders. Outside the laboratory's large viewing wall, she could see Zephyrian researchers dashing across boards with brooms. The patterns on their bioluminescent skin were rippling fast. That was a clear sign of intense agitation that every human on board had learned to pick up on by this point. Dr. Thorne, what do we know about how the Zephyrian hierarchy feels about this discovery? That's the problem, Commander. They're split down the middle. The moderates, under Councillor Velter, wish to survey another world. They claim their moral code does not permit them to displace another species, even if their journey would take a decade or more longer. Alina felt a flicker of hope. Now, if only the Zephorians wouldn't mind attempting to locate a nice empty planet of their own. This contingent crisis could be averted without any bloodshed. Still, Dr. Thorne had a serious expression on his face. But the far right is telling a very different story. They're saying that they've been traveling for 47 years. They're burning up their stores, and their people are exhausted, and so they have to land. And if there's any trouble with the local wildlife, they're using us, Alina finally said, and it all began to make sense. They plan to unleash the human military to cleanse the planet for Zephyrian settlement. Exactly. And Commander, there's something else. Our long-range sensors have detected a potential something that I think are spaceships in orbit around the planet. Not clunky age of Celeste ships, suggesting the natives have somehow mastered space. For all we know, they've built weapons systems that could knock a few Danielsons out of orbit. And we could be kicking off an interstellar war if we go over there with some hostility. Alina whirled around, her brain racing with the implications. She heard her officers behind her whispering to each other about tactical advancements. But to her, their words sounded distant, as though they were echoing from around the bend of a long tunnel. She took in the face of each one of the 15,000 men and women who had abandoned everything for this mission. They had families back on Earth, or on what remained of Earth after the gravitational disaster. They had sacrificed their entire lives to the dream of a new beginning among the stars. But they had also sworn oaths to protect innocent life, to be guardians, not half-forgotten conquerors. But when they discovered that there was native life on the planet they were traveling to, they were faced with an impossible decision. How could she protect her people and be faithful to the oaths she and they had sworn to protect and defend? Commander, Major Kim spoke quietly at her side. Whatever you thinking, we're not in the military anymore. We are the remnants of humanity. Everything that is done here today will decide how humanity lives on in history. Alina peered at her through the viewing wall. Sarah Kim was her closest confidant along that journey, a master strategist and stalwart in her sense of justice. But even with all that, she could provide no simplistic answer for their difficulties now. Dr. Thorne, I wish she would let them know about the council not gaining the Zephyrians' membership. All factions represented. We need to be very straightforward about the trade-offs we are making. Commander, just FYI, the Zephyrians are super pissed right now. There's even a rumor going around that some of the hardline factions are contemplating firing back at our human contingent if they think we're getting too much in the way of colonizing a planet body. Alina glanced toward her teammates, and the mantle of leadership fell across her shoulders as a heavy, almost familiar weight. Then we had better get that dry licked immediately before something gets done we'd all regret. The meeting room was one of the ship's main council chambers, a luminous space designed by Zephyrian architects and devoted to interspecies diplomacy. Bioluminescent panels on the ceiling, which reached thousands of feet into the sky and darkened and lightened depending on the emotions in the room, yielded to an even higher dome. When she and her senior staff entered the chamber, the lights were blinking red and orange in a deep red, flashing pattern, a sign of extreme stress and distress. The Zephyrian government was an assembly of 12 council members, rotating responsibilities on behalf of the office they represented. At the center of the semicircle sat the moderate faction leader, Councillor Veltar, tall, slender humanoid whose robes changed from green to blue depending on how he moved. On first approach, his kind resembled man, but drawn and fine, as if human features were the stuff of crystal and light. To his left was Councillor Kreshma, chief of the hardliners. If Veltar was a liquid serenity, then the presence of Kreshma was barely restrained martial rage. His stripes flared with the violence and sharpness of yellow spikes, a warning that everyone on the board had grown to fear. Commander Vasquez. Veltar spoke the B-fluent English with a smooth, ever so slightly accented roll which made her enjoy the musical tone of the Zephyrian tongue. It's great you've come to speak to us about our shared situation. As you know, our late discoveries cut up our former line of settlement. Alina advanced, maintaining the same distance from them that Zephyrian custom dictated. Councillor Veltar, an honorable council, we understand the gravity of the situation. Change in discovery of native sentience on the mission holding. We have to study it and make a decision. The patterns in Kreshma's skin flared, and he spoke in a rapid Zephyrian to the other members of the council. Alina had picked up enough Zephyrian by now to have an inkling of the idea, and had blood turned to ice. He was claiming that humanity had come to the end of its worth, that its further existence was an impediment to Zephyrian survival. Dr. Thorne came forward. An imperfect Zephyrian to this man. I take it as your speaking tube. Alina watched, attempting to flatten her own human mind to an alien scale of politics. For the most part, human culture and society was beyond human understanding on a core level, but they were still human enough to have politics. What a terrifying thought that was. Councillor Kreshma has a valid point. Councillor Veltar spoke again in English. He says our society has already paid a heavy price and that the course of nature has to be allowed to happen. Can't keep up this lifestyle of intergalactic travel looking for a planet with no civilizations. And the Council has determined, by its research, that the native species on the planet in question isn't technologically advanced enough to tap into all their ore. Alina felt her jaw tighten. So you're referring to genocide, then? No, Kreshma responded, still working to overcome his rage in the face of his broken English. Succession of the strong species, natural law, entire galaxy, is as such. Planet is ours, and yours to take it. Our species has a sense of justice, too, said Colonel Morrison. sounding like a man who had made life-or-death decisions for decades. We didn't come this far to be mass murderers. The lights in the council chamber shifted to increasingly darker red as tempers rose. Alina watched as other council members whispered to each other, allegiance by allegiance, flipping from one side to another as they, too, weighed survival against what was right. "There is another way," called out a new voice from the back of the chamber. Alina glanced up to see a Zephyrian woman, not much older than herself, entering the council chamber. Her tattoos were not based in angular geometric patterns, but rather delicate spirals. Dr. Thorne had mentioned her once. A junior staffer named Ruthless, who is working on alternative colonization schemes. "You will speak to me." Kreshma snapped at her in Zephyrian, but Velta motioned for her to continue. "Esteemed Council, Commander Vasquez, I've been reviewing the long-range sensor data from the system to which we're evacuating. There is native life on the second planet in this system, but the fourth planet is lifeless and could be terraformed." Alina felt a spark of hope. What would terraforming require? Lyrithus brought up a holler of scans of the fourth planet. It was smaller than their original target, had a tenuous atmosphere and little surface water, but the basic ingredients for life were there. The process would take an estimated 15 to 20 years with a blend of Zephyrian biotechnology and human industry. Both people of our species would have to cooperate, sharing our resources. Our know-how. Kreshma's skin patterns lit up with rage. "Impossible. Our peoples will not live another 20 years on this ship. We are running out of resources and our life support systems are breaking down. We need a livable world now, not decades from now. Then we figure it out and we make it work," Alina said firmly. "We set up a base on the moon of the destination world and begin to terraform the fourth planet. Both contribute equally, both share in the outcome." "Then, what about the flora of the second planet?" Veltar asked. "We just ignore that they exist." Alina glanced around the room, making eye contact with human and Zephyrian alike. "We make contact, peaceful contact. We describe what we're going through and ask if they can help. Perhaps they have resources, technology, or just knowledge that could be useful in the terraforming effort." Kreshma chuckled, the sound of shattering crystal. "Naive human thinking. You assume that other life forms must subscribe to your rudimentary ideas of cooperative mutualism. The galaxy is no place for children, Commander. It's a bloody field of combat, and only the strong will survive." "Then maybe someone should fix that," Alina said. "Perhaps it is time for someone to finally demonstrate that two unrelated species can bond in a mutually beneficial relationship, rather than always being at each other's throats over resources." The chamber grew quiet, only the quiet hum of the ship breaking the silence. Alina could see council members sharing glances, the patterns in their skin changing as they absorbed what she said. She made her feelings known, and now it was up to the rulers of Zephyria. Veltar spoke first. "Commander Vasquez, that suggestion has its merits, but too much cooperation and trust may prove challenging. We do have counselors who think with all your warlike nature that humanity is incapable of being the right partners to peacefully colonize with. We are suitable precisely because we are a fighting people," Colonel Morrison cut in. "We know what discipline and sacrifice working for a goal is all about. 47 years on this boat to show we can live with culture and technology. And you have 47 years of war training," Kreshma added. "Your weapons, your strategies, your very mindset is around conflict and control. How can we trust you to contribute toward a peaceful civilization?" Alina sensed the discussion slipping out from under her. tilting toward the ideological quagmire that had bogged down interstellar politics for ages. She had to come up with a way to penetrate the walls of mistrust and fear separating the two species. For the record, Kreshamar, you're also right. If not for the same reasons, you know we train for war. But do you know why we teach? How to go to war. Not because we are lovers of violence, but because we are aware of the price of peace. Every human on board this ship has witnessed what it looks like when civilization fails, when we resort to fighting over resources. She waved vaguely at the viewports that displayed the star-filled abyss beyond them. The remnants of human civilization are out there somewhere, likely shattered following the collapse, Tired wrote. We're the one that survives our kind, and we'll work with you to make something better now, not only for us, but for what our legacy will be for generations to come. Alina stopped and stared at each of the council members one by one. But if you attempt to make us your weapons, if you attempt to use us to commit acts of genocide against an innocent race, then you will learn how deadly trained soldiers can be when they are fighting for a cause they believe in. The lights of the chamber dimmed to the deep purple. Alina had learned to associate with deep thought among the Zeph. Council members were quiet, their skin swirls gliding deliberately in slow, meditative spirals. Finally, Veltar spoke. You give us a hard decision to make, Commander. Trust in that cooperation and face the ordeal of years or hardship or embrace. Conflict and experience instant security at the price of our moral being. Sometimes the hard choice is the right one, Alina said. That's what leadership means. With emotions running high and the endurance of several more hours of debate in both Cyprian and English, the latter interpreted into the former. The council session carried on. Alina sat back and watched the political dynamics in action, observing. As certain council members changed positions based on the arguments they heard. Dr. Thorne did the translating and interpreting, making it clear to Agatha the fine points involved in deciding what to do in Zephyr. As the session neared its end, Veltar asked for a vote on 3 alternatives. First off, land as per original plan, regardless of indigenous life. Second, despite diminishing resources, keep looking for a world not inhabited. Third, you put the Terraform project under Alina into effect while establishing peaceful relations with the natives. The vote was closer than what Alina had hoped for wanted to go through with the terraforming operation, for wanted to colonize immediately, and for wanted to keep searching. By Zephyrian custom, a tie vote signaled that the matter was tabled for reconsideration. But as Alina and her gang were about to exit the chamber, Larathus caught up to them with a pressing development. Sir, I have been eavesdropping on the target planet. The local creature has detected us, and it's making some kind of preparation. We will not have time for lengthy debate. Alina felt her heart sink. What kind of response? Unknown. But their orbital hotels have seen a 3-fold increase in activity over the past 6 hours. They know we are coming, and they are prepared for our arrival. Alina surveyed her officers and found her own anxiety mirrored in their faces. No matter what the Zephyrian Council's decision would be, events were quickly spiraling out of control. What happened over the next 2 days would decide the destiny of not only both refugee species, but perhaps the future of interstellar civilization. Dr. Thorne, I need you to coordinate with Larathus and develop a communication system with the local fauna. If they do, perhaps we can describe our predicament before they react as though our arrival is hostile. But what if they are unfriendly, sir? Colonel Morrison inquired. What if in the meantime they choose to raid the ship before we've contacted each other? Alina gazed over her shoulder toward the star system they were approaching, home to a species alien to them. A species about to come face to face with 2 shiploads of refugees with unknown motives. And then we demonstrate that not all first. Contacts need result in war, Colonel. We show that sometimes strangers can be allies. Tension mounted throughout the next 48 hours on the sanctuary. The Zephyrian Council was split and the hardline, and reformist elements in the council were not prepared to offer a compromise. Meanwhile, Dr. Thorne and Lyrithus were desperately trying to make contact with the native species they were sending. Messages using mathematical patterns and recurring science. Constance. Alina was prowling the human and Zephyrian sections of the ship, spending time with her troops, trying to keep them calm as the political situation deteriorated. She could read the tension in the faces of everyone. Sense the market held, waiting for decade, release its burden and descend into the uncertainty, and fear that it had for so long pretended did not exist. What led to the breakthrough surprised me most. A message from an individual he and Dr. Thorne were monitoring had entered Elena's readout, and Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, one of Dr. Thorne's communications officers, barreled into Elena's command center with news that completely turned everything on its head. Sarah, we have made contact with the locals. They are the Ketak, they said, and they want to talk. Alina felt her pulse quicken. What kind of talk, Lieutenant? They offer us to send a small delegation to their orbital station. They want to talk about what they term the coming of the lost children. Alina frowned. Lost children. Dr. Thorne's voice sounded on the intercom, nearly drenched in enthusiasm. Commander, you're going to want to listen to this. The Ketek aren't even Zavabanos to this world. They are refugees, too, from a species that fled their home system. Around 200 years ago, they've been terraforming this planet for a temporary home in their search for a new home. For Alina, it was all coming together. They're in the same boat that we're in. Exactly, and Commander, there's more. For decades, they've been eavesdropping on interstellar communications, listening for some other refugee species. They know of the Zephyrian exodus, and they're aware of the gravitational crisis on Earth. They've been expecting us, Alina made eye contact with her senior staff, and saw hope for the first time in days dawn in their faces. Lieutenant Rodriguez, send the Ketak a communication. Tell them we will come to talk. The group that went with us to the Ketak orbital was Alina, Dr. Thorne, Counselor Veltar, and Lyrothus. The trip in a customized Zephyrian shuttle had lasted 3 hours, and in that time, Alina had had the chance to reread all the information they had on their hosts. The Ketak were crystalline life forms based on silicon, which enabled them to survive in harsh environments that would be fatal to the humans or Zephyrian. Their science revolved around harmonic frequencies to control matter at the molecule level using sound and vibration. And most importantly, they had terraformed 7 planets in 2 centuries. Expertise that could prove crucial to the refugee coalition. The station orbited the dying system, a work of engineering that was a fixture in tales and legends, a thing that appeared to grow from crystals in the system rather than be constructed by hands through countless decades of visa. As their shuttle grew nearer the docking bay, Alina saw Ketok ships transferring to and from the station. Only they were not so much ships as organic things. The leader of the Ketok, who had greeted them at the airlock, identified himself as Harmonic. Primary with his body was an assembly of multifaceted crystal segments that rearranged themselves as he moved, producing a concert of soft musical sounds with each movement. When he did talk, it was translated, and he used a device to change his harmonic communication into something that his interlocutors could understand. Welcome, travelers from distant stars. We have waited for you this a long time. Alina dashed up, bowing as Dr. Thorne had taught her. We are delighted by your welcome, Harmonic Prime. We come for refuge and the prospect of living in peace. Reese's crystalline body sparkled and chimed like wind through a stand of wind chimes. Your kind are dying, as mine were when we escaped our dying world. But you have something we did not have during our exodus, something that could be our salvation. What is that? Veltar asked. Diversité, Reseth replied. Human industry, Zephyrian biotech, and Ketok harmonics engineering. Between us, we have the means to heal not just one world, but the very system to which it belongs. Elena's heart raced in her chest as Reseth led them down corridors in the station, briefing them with holographic images of the terraforming they had done to various colonies. Each world was unique, tailored to the particular requirements of refugee species they had encountered over the centuries. You've done this right. Alina tapped through pictures of thriving colonies. You've helped other species find new homes. Our mission is to Reseth said. When our world died, we swore that no other species would need die alone. We have grown to be shepherds of the displaced peoples of the galaxy, guiding them toward new homes amongst the stars. Dr. Thorne was all scientific interest. How many species have you assisted? 17 at the last count, distributed around this sector of the galaxy. Each colony is autonomous, but in touch with the others. We are creating a network of civilizations, a species community who cares for and helps one another instead of competes for resources. For Alina, it seemed as if an infinite number of other things were opening up before her. This was about more than just finding a new home for humans and Zephyrians. This was the opportunity to become a part of something that has never happened in the history of the galaxy. A cooperative, interstellar civilization. But Lyrithus was the one to verbalize. The fear that Alina knew was in the room. Harmonic Prime, this all sounds fantastic, but to be honest, we can't afford it. It's a 47-year journey, and we have thousands of people that need settlement now. Recess figure twisted to present a gentler, friendlier sound. We understand. Urgency, young scientist. The second planet, as temporary habitation facilities which can support Popultean while colonies are being set up. The fourth world has already been prepared for forming, and the third world shows potential for Ketok harmonic growing. Alina looked at the holographic display that presented the full star system with various points indicating the possible colony sites for each species. You are presenting us a whole new system. We are asking you to be our partner, Resith corrected. Your kind have certain skills that can be useful to the whole of the refugee network. Human military. Knowledge can protect fragile colonies against species that prey upon them. Zephyrian tech boosts terraforming too. In exchange, you are now a member of a galactic civilization that's going to survive any one world or star system. The implications were staggering. Alina remembered her 15,000 human, warm profession soldiers wanting for peace. Her mind traveled to the hundreds of thousands of Zephyrians on the sanctuary, looking for a new home after fleeing their dying star. And she thought of the Ketok, who had promptly set about turning their own tragedy into a crusade of hope on behalf of other dispossessed species. There is one problem, Veltar said slowly. Not all of our people will agree with this cooperative vision, and there are groups of both humans and Zephyrians who think that strong should be able to kill weak. Reset's luring voice changed into a more serious tone. We have seen these sentiments before. Very few are actually the product of malice, but rather fear and desperation. But we have seen that cooperative civilizations must be able to resist those who would take advantage of their cooperative spirit. Alina understood the implication. You'd think that if someone attempted to disturb this cooperation, the other colonies will come back. You say the refugee system covers for its members, Reseth said. But most importantly, species that successfully maintain cooperation and mutual aid facilitate the expedient expansion of their abilities. Colonies where we'd lent a hand in establishing themselves are now more prosperous and more secure than they could have been alone. They toured the orbital station for several more hours, Reseth pointing out examples of Paklan species. Cooperation that flew in the face of everything Alina had been taught about galactic politics. She glimpsed Ketak engineers collaborating with insectoid refugees on breaking ground with new methods of construction. She saw water life and silicon life working on atmosphere processing facilities. Most notably, she observed former foes collaborating on undertakings that had widespread impacts on whole star systems, and so when they came back to the sanctuary, Alina convened a meeting with the human leaders and the Council of Zeph. The discovery of the Ketak refugee network had changed everything, presenting opportunities none of them had even dared to contemplate. The council chamber was crowded with members of both races, and Babylon was a babel of English and Zephyrian, expressive of the uncertainty of the moment. Alina was in the center of the chamber, and there was the long accumulation of history pressing on her shoulders. What we found out today is something so new that everything is different, she began, her voice echoing sharply over the chambers. Acoustic systems. We're not refugees just looking for a new home. Imagine if we have a chance to be another unprecedented moment in galactic history. She triggered the holographic display, pictures of the Ketak refugee network, and the flourishing colonies they had erected with the assistance of the Zephyrians' networks. The chamber gasped and exclaimed, her representatives shocked to see the proofs that interstellar cooperation was not only feasible but active and effective in a local part of the galaxy. Councillor Kreshma was the first to protest against her offer. It's a little too perfect, a bit too convenient. Why would the Ketak be so nice to complete strangers? What do they earn if they assist us? She took the next step with Dr. Thorne. As harmonic prime reset suggests, they obtain the same advantages available to all members of their network, better security and success through shared cooperation. The greater the number of species that come together in a network, the better it becomes. I could perceive your concern, Kreshma. I truly do. But we have the very same assurances that prevent us from insulting. Harassing the friendly comes from common advantage, mutual survival. Together, we are much stronger than we are divided. Prepost ease within the chamber, perimeter major, to provide our military personnel. In this networking setting, what usage of our defense force might Heart have? According to harmonic prime reset, each member species contributes to the best of their abilities. Human military expertise could be used to assist in shielding defenseless colonies from strikes by wicked forces. United Nations, New York, not as oppressors or conquerors, but as the shield of civilization. Major leaned ahead. Her tactical plan claimed to have her problem thought by then. We can, Commander, give us a chance. We don't have to admit reliance on fatuous charity. The arguments went on for hours, species representatives alternating concerns and possibilities. Alina observed the political situation playing itself out, and even the hardliners were changing their minds as the refugee network was exposed. Yet, it was Lyrithus who raised the crucial question. If we plug into this network, what will become of our sense of species.esp? In becoming citizens of the galaxy, do we have to give up what it means to be human or Zephyrian? Alina had been curious about the same thing, and she was glad that Dr. Thorne had an answer derived from his discussions with Harmonic Prime Reseth. Diversity is something that we really believe in. Diversity is the strength of our network, says Ketok Entertainment. Every species preserves its individual culture and identity while working together for the greater good. We don't want assimilation, but cooperation. As the meeting ended, Alina could tell that the tide was turning to become in favor of joining. The network of refugees, even some of Kreshma's own supportive backers were starting to inquire about the utility in cooperating as opposed in merely objecting to the idea. But an unlikely source would have the last word. The senior medical officer, Captain Rebecca Santos, who had been silent during the discussion, rose to speak to the chamber. I've been a medic for 47 years. Had both human and Zephyrian patients on this ship, she said, and there was the weight of that experience in her words, the weight of the best and worst of their two peoples. I've seen human and Zephyrian people work together, and fight together and find ways to exist together even when we disagree. She motioned at the diverse crowd in the chamber. Because if we can make cooperation work on one ship, surely we can make it work through one galaxy. The Ketark have given us an opportunity to show that two species working together can create something better than any one of us could build alone. As Elena listened to Captain Santos, she felt a burst of pride. That was why she had faith in her people, in why she believed that humanity had something to offer galactic civilization, and they had learned how to overcome the politics of polarization, not as an exercise in theoretical idealism, but through real necessity. The final vote was closer than Alina had planned, but nonetheless definitive. 7 of 12 Zephyrian councillors voted to enter the refugee network. Human officials voted for the plan in every case. It wasn't the landslide mandate Alina would have preferred, but it would be enough to proceed. As the assembled chamber emptied, Councillor Kreshma came to Alina, his face a combination of defeat and reluctant admiration for her. Vasquez, I think you whore naive when it comes to the politics of this galaxy still. If your definition of fantasy is, fantasy should be this puffed up, serious thing, you're not going to enjoy this kind of fiction. Maybe to attempt something this ambitious, you need to be kind of naive. Alina gave him a small smile. Counselor, sometimes what you mistake for naivety is actually just the bravery that it takes to hope for something better. The forthcoming weeks were a whirl of preparation and bargaining. The sanctuary orbited the second planet, and teams from each species cooperated to construct temporary settlements. Alina had spent the bulk of her time bouncing back and forth between the ship, the Ketek orbital station, and the planet's surface, managing the detailed logistics of a three-species colonization program. That the provisional encampments were a triumph of interspecies civil engineering. Ketak harmonic construction was the foundation. They built domes to quarantine various atmospheres so people could actually live there. Zephyrian biological engineering added recycling air and water with a food production system. Human artisanship dealt with the heavy construction and transportation systems that moved supplies around from site to site. Alina stood on the main settlement's observation deck, observing human marines with Zephyrian engineers and Ketak harmonicists building a communications array. The scene would have been unimaginable months earlier, but now appeared as routine as breathing. Commander Sergeant Chen called out from behind her. Our advanced scout teams have completed their study of the fourth planet The reports are remarkable. Alina looked up to see Chen on his way back with a tablet showing the survey results. Following him came Dr. Thorne and Lyrithus, both radiating the excitement that could only be felt by beings who felt like they were part of a major scientific discovery. What did they find, Sergeant? The planet is rich in the minerals we need for terraforming, Dr. Thorne said, with no small excitement. The Ketak have already initiated atmospheric processing, and the estimated date of full habitability has been cut from 20 years down to 12. Lyrithus flipped a hologram, revealing the planetary surface of the fourth planet. Commander, the Ketak has given the colony access to all of their terraforming database. And when we merge Cephrean technology with human industry, we can make this world something new. Alina studied the projections, which showed a world with the ability to sustain multiple forms of life in its own, unconnected but linked ecosystems. Who could it take care of? Somewhere around 2 million, taking conservatively, Dr. Thorne answered. But that's just the beginning. The Ketak had shown us concrete examples of planets able to sustain tens of millions of beings, including over a dozen distinctive species. Alina felt an overwhelming sense of potential stretching out before her. There was room for growth, for new arrivals, for that kind of thriving civilization that could, over a couple of centuries, last for millennia. 2 million people stood for not only the current refugee populations, but that kind of possibility. But she was cut off by an urgent signal coming from the command center of the ship. There was a tension in Colonel Morrison's voice that immediately put everyone on the observation deck at attention. Commander, we have a situation. There is also a possible threat. We have detected several ships on long-range sensors heading for the system. Profile indicates they're not part of the refugee net. Alina felt her stomach drop. How many ships, Colonel? At least 12, possibly more. They will arrive in the outer system in roughly 18 hours. Alina closed her eyes, command, heavy on her shoulders once more. When the new challenges were coming from nowhere, it seemed like they had discovered a way that both races might live peacefully side by side. But now, against the empty, hard. Dr. Thorne, you must relay me to Harmonic Prime Reset at once. We want to know if these are friendly ships or enemy ships. An hour later, Alina had returned to the Ketacontological station and stood in the command center with Harmonic Prime Reset, as well as the senior race officials from all three species. The huge holographic display showed the approaching ships, their formations alien but undeniably martial. We're not detecting those fills, announced Reseth, his harmonics tinged with concern. It's not from the refugee network, and it doesn't match any of the known exploratory ships from any of the cooperative species. Counselor Veltar watched the readout with increasing dismay. The ship designs hint to more sophisticated military technology. Whoever they are not coming in peace. Alina could sense her military discipline kicking in, her brain going into automatic tactical mode. Harmonic Prime, how strong? Are the refugee network's defenses? Simple defensive systems are kept by individual colonies, Reseth answered. But the network's first best answer has always been mobility and cooperation. Refugee populations can flee to other systems. In the network when under threat. That's not something we can do here, Alina said firmly. We have hundreds of thousands of people in the process of doing the permanent settlements. We can't just run and leave everything behind. Colonel Morrison hit the tactical display nearby, which outlined the layout of the system and diagrams. Potential defensive positions. Commander, If we're going to defend this position, we'd better get a defense perimeter planned. The ships approaching shall have the element of surprise and superior position. Alina glanced around the command center and looked at the faces of both humans and aliens standing side by side to fight together. Human marines, Zephyrian scientists, Katok engineers, all combined toward a common future. The ships closing in were a hazard not only to their immediate physical existence, but to the entire principle of joint civilization. Harmonic Prime, can you reach others in the refugee network? If we are going to defend this system, we need to know what support could be there. The light of Reseth refracted, building up in tessellating harmonics patterns as he activated the network's communication media. This is an emergency call for all colonies on the net. Their response time will vary based on their locations and resources. Through the danger, Dr. Law studied the oncoming ships, peering at the sensor displays even as they were not to be. Trusted, Captain. I'm getting some strange energy readings coming from the first ship. Maybe they're using tech we don't even know exists. Alina nodded, thoughts of tactics flashing through her head. Thorn, I need you to collaborate with Lyrithus and all Ketak technical crews and study the energy readings. We must know what it is that we are dealing with. Colonel Morrison. Preparations for defense at once. It's all human recon here, as I want you all prepared for hostiles, but to coordinate with Zephyrian and Ketak forces. We're not just defending ourselves now, we're defending the whole refugee network. The remaining hours were a frenzied whirlwind of preparation. Marine infantry were placed on stations throughout the system, their preparation and armament. A cohesive mix of Zephyrian biologold and Ketak harmonic weaponry. Alina was coordinating a military extravaganza, the likes of which the world had never seen. A multi-species defense force with one common cause. The breakthrough came from an odd quarter. The two had been going out for 9 months, and Rodriguez, who was sifting through communications traffic, recognized a signal pattern that caused him to summon Alina to the command center. Sir, you've got to hear this. I've been studying. The transmission of the incoming ships and their protocols seem oddly familiar. We need to know what is going on. Alina ran to the comm station where Rodriguez was playing intercepted audio traffic. I didn't recognize the language, but I could make out many of the underlying mathematical structures. Lieutenant, why? You think these signals be sounding familiar? The harmonic patterns, Commander. They are, in many respects, recognizable as what we learned from the Ketak, but deeper and more aggressive. It feels like they're employing the same basic technology, but for an entirely different point. Recognition tingled along Elena's spine. Rodriguez, are you suggesting that these ships may be utilizing corrupted Ketak drive technology? Before Rodriguez could respond, the voice of Harmonic Prime, Reseth, echoed throughout the command center with intonation of immense concern. We know who those ships belong to, Commander Vasquez. They are the warships of the Devourers, a race who have denied the ways of cooperation and instead embraced consumption and domination. Elena's blood went cold. Devourers an form we chanced upon 400 cycles past, Reseth replied, his polyphonic intonation laden with the burden of antiquity. We can offer them entrance into our network of refugees, but more likely they'd simply steal our technology and use it to prey upon other species. We've been following them through the galaxy, trying to warn off possible prey. Alina looked at the tactical display. With the ships getting closer now in a completely different, horrifying light. They're not just random raiders, they're specifically targeting refugee settlements. Correct, Reseth confirmed. They are still exploring our systems. trying to make a grab for the technology and resources invented and built by refugee species, to destroy colonies, to prevent strikes in return. Over the last century, they have targeted 7 network encampments. Hot fury rose cold fury in Elena's chest, a past muscle that had come under control over decades of military service. How many colonies have been raised by them? 5 were completely eliminated. 2 were able to flee before the attacks, but lost everything they had created. Elena glanced around at the faces of the humans, and Zephyrians, and Ketak, that had filled the command center. Not this time. This time, though, they will face organized resistance. Colonel Morrison came to the front, looking grim yet resolute. "Commander, what are your orders?" Elena surveyed the tactical display, thoughts flying through her brain, through the potential scenarios and the inevitable possibilities. The Devourer fleet was too big to compete with theirs all at once. But they had tricks the raiders wouldn't see coming. "Colonel, I need all human units combined with Zephyrian and Ketak forces. We'll give these Devourers a taste of what it feels like to come up against a friendly people." "Elena," Dr. Thorne said, calling her by her first name in a manner that suggested the seriousness of what he was going to say. "The Devourers aren't just raiders. By Ketak accounts, they've got technology built specifically against refugee network defense. This is going to be no ordinary fight." Elena nodded, understanding the implication. "Then we don't have a traditional fight. We battle as they have never seen before, a fully integrated multi-species combat force." The following 12 hours were a frenetic chaos of preparing and organizing. Elena coordinated with the military leaders of all 3 species, sharing strategies that exploited the combined attributes of each. Human Marines brought discipline and tactical knowledge. Zephyrian biotech provided adapter weapons and defenses. Ketak harmonic engineering led to communication and coordination systems that bound the entire force into a single responsive creature. Elena watched them move into solid formation and clutched the arm of the commander's chair, watched as they took the outer system, then glanced around her at the aliens from 3 worlds, the beings of disparate species, linked by the same set to defend what they had created. Their defensive formations were rendered on the holographic display, a webwork of ships and stations tangled together in what was the greatest of cooperative civilization. "All squadrons, this is Commander Vasquez," Elena said through the command wide. "Comms today. We're not just defending our own species," he wrote. We're defending the possibility that different peoples can work together to their good and our mutual credit to build a world better than any of us could have, built on our own." The Devourers entered the system like a locust storm, weapons all primed to scour resources from their helpless prey. But instead of a disorganized mass of terrified refugees, they encountered a coordinated force of resistance that fought with an unusual sense of unity and purpose. It had raged hard and at heavy expense, but Elena could have told from the start that the Devourers had not expected this sort of resistance. Their strategies were meant to crush isolated outposts, not stand against a united multi-species force that learned from and reacted to such tactics as a whole. Marines fought alongside Zephyrian bio-warriors, as well as Ketok harmonic defenders, in manners that combined one another in ways that were lethally effective. The Devourers had their stolen technology used against them, their weapons rendered impotent, against defenses incorporating principles that they never took the time to comprehend. Then came the watershed moment when Elena did something to take her officers by storm. Rather than letting the Devourer fleet fly off, She declared a joint chase that would not let them retreat to feed on other refugee colonies. Commander Colonel Morrison came in over calm. If we chase them beyond the systemize and leave our colonies open for a counter to attack. Colonel, if we allow them to escape, they will only strike another colony. It is time to make the galaxy understand that they cannot simply prey on cooperative civilizations. The chase took 3 days as the refugee fleet, now combined, hunted the Devourers between 2 star systems. Alina managed the operation from the command center, and could only marvel at the sustained teamwork that was bringing them actual victory. When the Devourer fleet finally laid down their arms, Alina was left with the most important choice that would determine the fate of the refugee network. The captured ships also housed dozens of species technology that had been stolen, technology that could be sent back to its original owners. But they also held the very Devourers who for centuries had predated upon helpless colonies. Commander, transmit harmonic prime reset, asked over the comm line, what shall we do with the Devourers that have been captured? Alina eyed the holoscreen, displaying the surrendered flotilla and balanced justice with mercy in her mind. We give them the same choice we give every species, harmonic prime. They can sign on as part of the refugee network and become part of a cooperative civilization, or they can be banished to some far-out place in the galaxy where they won't be able to menace innocent colonies. And if they reject both options, Elena's expression hardened, then we put them in a place where they're never going to do this again. The Devourer response surprised everyone. With cooperation in mind, or out of barefaced pragmatism, almost 2/3 of their number decided to lend their support to the refugee network. The other third were sent out to the Galactic shack, their vessels retrofitted to eliminate advanced armed and their navicomps reprogrammed to prevent them from ever returning to civilized space. 6 months later, Alina was in the command center, looking at the 4th planet's terraforming project near the final stages. The world that would be human beings' new home was taking form, with an atmosphere thickening up and its surface water beginning to gather into the lakes and rivers that would sustain millions of lives. But even more than that, the victory over the Devourers had changed the refugee network from a collection of individual colonies into a real galactic civilization. Report of the victory had spread across the galaxy, and it gave other races hope. The victory had proven that cooperation would defeat conquest, and that the network was not unbeatable. Commander, Dr. Thorne said from over her shoulder, we just received reports from the network colonies. They're insufferable. Sign-ups for membership are up 400% in the last 6 months. Alina turned to find herself face to face, not only with Dr. Thorne, but with a group that had come to be something of a family for her over the past year. Colonel Morrison, Major Kim, Sergeant Chen, and Lieutenant Rodriguez were joined by Counselor Veltar Lirithos and a handful of Ketak technicians who had been incorporated into the integrated command. What species are applying? Alina asked. All kinds, Lirithos added quite cheerfully. Never mind the aquatic energy, and even a few Martian-based sentients. The galaxy is teeming with refugees and displaced peoples who simply needed to see that cooperation was possible. Alina gazed out at the expanding planet and the lights of settlements starting to glow on its face. Human metropolises, Zephyrian biocomplexes, Ketark harmonic gardens, each linked together through transit systems that enabled different species to occupy the same planetary orb without ever losing their individual character. Harmonic Prime Reseth messaged me this morning, Alina said to the group. The refugees now span 47 species in 12 systems, including 15 humans. He's suggesting we form a permanent galactic council to cautiously coordinate network expansion and defense. The colonel smiled, the lines on his weathered face so contented that Alina had never seen it like that before. Commander, do you know what we just did? We were military refugees. We had been trained for war, so we expected to struggle to survive. We got out of it and became the new founding members of a galactic civilization. Alina looked at her and felt the weight of history finally settle on her shoulders in a manner that was in some strange way lighter than the pressures of command had ever been. We've shown that different species can unite, that cooperation is more powerful. Then Conquest Major Kim moved toward her, trying to look serious, but also hopeful. Commander, there's something else. Ale Draugr, the Kamsa arrays we've set up indicate that we're receiving signals from the vicinity of Earth's solar system. Very weak ones, but I think literally there are some human colonies that got through. The gravitational disaster, Elena's heart missed a beat. So, you're saying we may have a way to communicate back with Earth? It's possible, Kim replied. The technology we're talking about from the refugee network would let us transmit messages across light years. Perhaps we will even be able to tell them that humanity has taken its place in the stars. Alina scanned the faces around her, looking for a mirror for her own feelings. They had progressed so much from the forlorn refugees who had first stepped onto the sanctuary almost 50 years ago. They had found more than just a new home. They had found a new mission that transcended their own survival as a species. And Dr. Thorne, I'd like you to touch base with the Ketok engineers here and develop a long-range communications proposal. We understand and agree, but if there are any humans left, they need to be told about the refugee network. Commander. A different voice issued from the speaker. It was Captain Santos, speaking by phone from the Surface Medical Center. Just an FYI, we've had our first interspecies birth. A happy, healthy baby with traits from both human and Zephyrian stock, and perfectly in tune with the planet to boot. Alina felt the tears come into her eyes as she finally understood the gravity of what Captain Santos had said. They were not just building a new civilization, they were building a new kind of people. Creatures who would grow up taking cooperation between species as natural and normal. Captain, that's wonderful news. How are the parents? Proud as any. New parents can be, said Santos with a laugh. They are already talking about what kind of education their child might need to join the galactic community. Alina peered out at the planet below, the future spreading out before them like the starry heavens above, endless in its potential. The kid Captain Santos had described would be raised to believe that humans, Zephyrians, and Ketak were supposed to work together as easily as they breathed. They'd study languages of countless worlds, technologies blending the best from dozens of races, maybe even journey out to form new colonies that brought the ethic of cooperation to even greater heights between the stars. Captain, came Harmonic Prime Reseth's voice, deep, dark, and satisfied in the command center. I have heard from the Galactic Council. The Refugee 2 network has now been formally recognized as its own sovereign interstellar civilization. We are not refugees anymore. We are citizens of a different kind of galactic infrastructure. Alina was filled with an immense surge of achievement. They had begun as survivors from dying worlds, that much I knew, but they were something never before seen in the recorded history of the galaxy. A civilization of cooperation, not one of conquest and domination. Harmonic Prime, how exciting is this recognition for the network? It means now we are equals of the great civilizations of the galaxy. It means our principles of cooperation and mutual aid are not only valid in theory, but also in practice. And it's the other side of the coin that other animals will see in us, a model of what a cooperative species can accomplish. A species made up of various people coming together to achieve common ends. Alina glanced around at the overall command center, with its humans, Zephyrians, and Ketok, working as if they'd been brought up on the same world. The technology they developed was based on the three species' best innovations, yielding abilities none could have achieved on their own. Wait, Alina told the room before she finished. I have been thinking long and hard about what we should call our new world. We can't just keep calling it the fourth planet forever. What do you suggest, Commander? Councillor Veltar asked. Alina smiled, gazing upon the world that would soon be the home to millions of various life forms from all over the galaxy. I suggest we call it Haven, a place where we can all feel safe, where cooperation prevails and where the future is forged together, not fought over. The name carried unanimously, and within a short matter of hours, antennae around the galaxy were humming with the news that Haven was established as the first truly mixed species world in the history of known space. Alina was in the command center during the transition from day shift to night shift, when night descended upon the burgeoning cities we cared so much about. The villages of humanity twinkled next to Zephyrian biocomplexes, glowing cold from their bioluminescent light, and Ketak, with mature, resonancer sound patterns. It was a vision that just 2 years before would have been inconceivable, but now it felt as natural as the stars. Commander, Sergeant Chen sounded clipped through the calm, as though he was summoning every last ounce of his marine bearing in order to maintain the necessary restraint, to keep from slamming the mic down, or, for that matter, using it to call in an orbital strike. Evening reports are in, sir, and colony constructions ahead of schedule. Estimated integration into the new populations going well. Population isn't even close to a division by species. Any more first graduating bunch of cadets out of the Interspecies Academy be ready for constructive warping next month. Alina nodded, savoring a satisfaction that was beyond professional achievement. They had fashioned something enduring, something that would stand the test of any generation, a civilization that would expand and evolve far onto the horizon. Of the future, Alina stopped at the viewing port. As she got ready to leave the command center for a last look at Haven, the planet was now more than just a terraforming project or strategic necessity. It was inhabited by a new kind of people who would grow up considering cooperation among species to reflect the normal order of the universe. The commish crackled as a message from the outer system rang in. Alina turned on the display, curious to learn what could have captured them out here, but instead the face of a person she had not seen in almost 50 years filled the screen. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force Starship Endeavour, the woman on the screen said, her voice somehow preserving clarity across the light years. My commander has asked that we have to your system. We come in peace from the remaining human colonies and the reformed Earth Federation. Alina could feel her heart pounding as she looked at the message. The human survivors of that time hadn't simply survived the gravitic apocalypse, they had succeeded and grown strong enough to launch interstellar campaigns. The circle was complete. Humanity had reached the stars, and, this time, the stars were bringing humanity home. This is Alina calling from all stations on comms. Get ready for visitors from Earth. Today, we find out that mankind's stroll through the stars has barely started. Alina gazed once more out to Haven, the glowing future beacon, as not only the lights of a new people, but an indicator that one day the stars themselves would become home for hundreds of species as they worked together to achieve common dreams. The Ark ship had brought hope across the void, and that hope had found purchase in the stars, had grown into something far more than any single species might have dreamed. Those same human marines who had begun this journey as refugees fleeing their doomed home world were now the founders of a galaxy. Their arms had been turned into instruments of defense. For conquest, they were no longer available. The logic of discipline had made possible an extraordinary cooperation. Their bravery had been an example to all species in the galaxy that it was better to be together as allies rather than in conquest. Alina strolled through the halls of Haven's largest spaceport, and the future was taking form around her, human. Children frolicking with Zephyrian fledglings and Ketark crystal spawn. Scientists from scores of species contributing to projects that would help the whole galaxy. Artists developing pieces that hybridized aesthetic traditions from across the visible universe. Overhead, the Ark ship sanctuary floated, no longer a mutinous vessel packed with refugees, but a testament to what could be achieved if different species chose cooperation over confrontation. It had been a museum and a training center, a place where young creatures from far across the galaxy could come to understand the principles that had given birth to their civilization. Alina observed from the spaceport's observation lounge as the EDS Endeavour asteroid miner ship slowly approached the orbital docks at Haven. The ship alone was bigger and better equipped than anything humanity had, saying nothing. The point was clear. The human colonies hadn't just survived. They'd flourished and expanded since the sanctuary had first set out. As the airlock shut behind the representatives from Earth, Alina had an overwhelming sense of closure, for their odyssey had begun with desperate refugees fleeing a cosmic apocalypse, and it had culminated with what would soon grow into a galaxy-spanning civilization, and which would last for untold millennia. The Ark ship had borne hope across the void, and that hope had sprouted among the glitter of stars, blossoming into something far superior to what any one species could ever have conceived on its own. And the future lay ahead for them endless, glowing with promise.